Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We are continuing our SEC football predictions today, and our next team has a new head coach, returns 19 starters, and are looking to bounce back from what was a disappointing 2017 season. They are the Florida Gators. Florida lost 3 games by a combined 11 points last season. So a 4-7 record could have very easily been a 7-4 record, but regardless of that, the Jim McElwain era came to an end, and now they bring in Dan Mullen, who is familiar with the Florida program. He did a great job at Mississippi State, and he inherits a very, very talented team this year with 19 returning starters, including 10 on offense and 9 on defense. And on offense, I know everybody's saying that there is a quarterback battle going on, but in my opinion, I think it is Felipe Frank's job to lose. He looked the most impressive in games last year, and I think he's going to be the best quarterback for the system that Dan Mullen is trying to implement here at Florida. They have Jordan Scarlett at running back, Tyree Cleveland at wide receiver, and then on defense are going to have a very, very solid secondary. C.J. Henderson leading the pack at cornerback. So I'm very excited to see how this Florida team does, see how they bounce back from what was a very disappointing 4-7 2017 campaign. But I have a lot of faith in Dan Mullen. This is a team that, because of their record last year and because of bringing in a new head coach, a lot of people aren't paying much attention to, but could surprise a lot of people nationally and in the SEC East. They open the season against Charleston Southern, which should not be a problem at all. This is going to be a great test and a great place to see where this Florida team's at. How did they adjust to Dan Mullen's new schemes on offense and defense? How's Felipe Franks? How are the quarterbacks going to play? It's just a good way to kind of get a feel for the way the season's going to go and fix anything they need to do before they start SEC play against Kentucky in Week 2. And that's going to be a big game as well. It always is a big game because the major question is, when will the streak end? Florida has won 31 straight games against the Kentucky Wildcats, and it nearly came to an end last year. Florida winning that game on the road 28-27, scoring late in the fourth quarter, and Kentucky missing a field goal as time expired for the win. So I know it's very painful for the Wildcats fans. They're just praying for the day when they will beat Florida in football, and unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be this year. I think Florida's just going to have too much talent. They have the home crowd on their side. Kentucky's not going to have a solid offense this year. I really do love their running back in Benny Snell, maybe their quarterbacks. Early on in the season, maybe a little bit halfway through the season, can start picking up things. I would be a little more tempted to pick them in more games. They still have Steven Johnson at quarterback, but he has departed. So really just going to rely on Benny Snell there. Should have a solid defense, but not enough to come into Gainesville and get a win over the Gators. Colorado State would have been a little more interesting because this was Jim McElwain's former school before he took the Florida job. But obviously he has gone to another win for the Gators there. And at Tennessee, if you remember last year's game against Tennessee, it was a thriller. 2 teams that really had a really disappointing season last year, but we didn't know that at this point in the season. Florida winning on a game-winning Hail Mary as time expired. I believe Tyree Cleveland caught that touchdown pass. It was a thrilling game, heartbreaking for the Volunteers. Just amazing for the Gators. Last time they came to Neyland Stadium, though, Tennessee snapped their losing streak to Florida, defeating them 38-28, but of course that was with Butch Jones and a much better Tennessee team. This is a Tennessee team that has a lot of unknowns on both sides of the balls. It's going to be very interesting to see how Jeremy Pruitt comes in, new head coach, taking over a Tennessee team that has a solid quarterback in Keller Crisp, but I don't have a lot of faith in them this year. I think it's going to be a rebuilding year for them. Florida, with the talent, the experience, and the head coach that has coached in the SEC before as a head coach and a coordinator, I think Florida's going to have a pretty easy time here against Tennessee on the road. And they're going to start off the season 4-0. Coming into the most anticipated game, I think, on Florida's schedule at Mississippi State, the return of Dan Mullen to Starkville. You know, sometimes when a coach leaves to go to another school in the same conference, it takes them a long time to return to the school they left from, and not for Dan Mullen. He's coming back in year 1 and in week 5 at that, and they should be 4-0 coming into this game. Mississippi State also bringing in a new head coach in Joe Moorhead. Great quarterback that Dan Mullen recruited, and Nick Fitzgerald. He's going to have a big year, and they have 17 starters returning as well. I could see this game being a shootout, having a lot of points put up in Starkville. I'm really excited to see this game. It's going to go back and forth, back and forth. You know Dan Mullen wants to win it, not just for Florida, but just for a little bit of pride as well. Mississippi State, of course, wanting to ruin Dan Mullen's homecoming, but he did so much for that program. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. In the end, I'm going to give the edge to the Bulldogs, this is totally going to be based on home field advantage. Florida might have more returning starters, may have a little more talent on the defensive side of the ball. Mississippi State's going to have that home crowd, and I think have a little bit of an edge on the offensive side of the ball. I'm going to give the win to the Bulldogs here in what should be a very, very exciting game and an emotional game for both sides. LSU at home for Florida. If you remember last year, Florida nearly beat LSU, losing on a missed PAT. They lost 17-16, so that's heartbreaking. I really think that was the beginning of the decline for Florida last season. I think if they had won that game, maybe they could have had a little pep in their step. I think they lost the following week to Texas A&M by 2 points. So when you lose back-to-back games by a combined 3 points, it really puts a damper on your intensity and on your hype for a team. And they get LSU this year back at home for back-to-back years, an LSU team that's going to be extremely weak, especially on offense. And with 9 returning starters on defense, I think Florida's going to be able to shut down the LSU offense. The LSU defense, however, is going to be their strength, and I keep saying that, but Dan Mullen is an offensive mastermind. He's going to have a plan to come in here and beat LSU. We saw what he did against LSU at home with Mississippi State last year, beating them 37-7, and that was with a much better LSU team. I know this is a completely different team with Florida, but I like their offense. I like Dan Mullen's mind. I think they're going to get a big win here at home against LSU, and it shouldn't be much of an issue. On the road at Vanderbilt, Florida only winning against Vanderbilt at home by 14 last year. Of course, Florida didn't have a great year last year. Vanderbilt, a team that I want to see get back to a bowl game because I have a lot of respect for Derek Mason. I have a lot of respect for him as a head coach, more of a defensive-minded coach. He will probably pull off an upset or two this year at home. I really hope they can get back to that bowl game. I like Kyle Shermer as well at running quarterback, but this is a Vanderbilt team that is going to struggle a little bit this year, and I really just don't think it's going to be a big enough match for the Gators. I think they're going to be able to come in here and get a big win on the road again. So they only have one loss coming into their bye week, and that loss is coming to a very solid Mississippi State team. The bye week coming into the annual game against Georgia in Jacksonville, a Georgia team that made the college football playoff, made the national championship last year, returns their quarterback, returns a solid running back, wide receivers. I see a lot of similarities between this Florida offense and this Georgia offense. Now, it's going to come down to defense. Yes, Florida returns more starters on the defensive side of the ball, 9 starters for them compared to Georgia's 5. But Kirby Smart is a defensive-minded coach. This game was a blowout last year, and it will be the exact opposite this year. It is going to be a close game. I can see this game coming down to the wire. But in the end, I'm going to give it to the Georgia Bulldogs, a win here in Jacksonville. Just knowing there's more on the line for them coming into this game. Of course, if Georgia could pull this one off, or if Florida could pull this one off, they would be probably sitting atop the SEC East standing. So it's big if these results hold. But in the end, I think Kirby Smart's going to get the best of Dan Mullen. And I think Florida loses a devastating loss to Georgia in Jacksonville. And then they come back home for 3 straight home games, which is going to be big for Florida, no doubt. Missouri at home, a Drew Lock-led quarterback team. I'm very excited to see how he does. He's going to be a high pick in the NFL draft come April. But a defense that I also think could struggle a little bit, which is super weird because Barry Odom is a defensive-minded coach. I know sometimes you can't have all the talent there, but the offense should be explosive for Missouri. They're going to put a lot of points on a lot of people, much like they did last year when they went on that winning streak after starting off 1-5. But it's in the swamp. It's a tough place to play. We know that. It's late in the season. It's November, the most crucial month of college football. And I think Florida, any problems they've had up to this point, which wouldn't have been many after only having 2 losses, they're going to have fixed. Dan Mullen's going to have fixed. He has experience coaching in the SEC. He's not just a newcomer. They're going to get a win against Missouri at home. And then South Carolina, Will Muschamp facing off against his former school, which he's been doing for the past couple years at South Carolina. And it's going to be another fun one. Florida only losing to South Carolina on the road last year by 8 points. So this game has the potential to be close as well. And another great offensive battle. Jake Bentley, Felipe Franks, Rico Dowdle, and Jordan Scarlett. You got Deebo Samuel, Tyree Cleveland. So it's going to be a fun offensive battle, I think. But I think Florida's going to have the better defense when it matters the most. They're going to get the stop when it counts the most. I like this game. I think it's going to be a back-and-forth game for about 3 quarters. Florida pulls away late with a couple turnovers. They get a win at home against South Carolina. And then Idaho, another win for Florida. They just dropped down to the FCS. This game was scheduled back when Idaho was FBS, but now they're FCS. So that's 2 FCS opponents on the schedule for Florida. So to be bowl eligible, they, of course, are going to have to win 7, not 6, because you can't count two FCS schools on your record. And then the season finale, as always, against Florida State on the road, which is going to benefit the Seminoles in this one. Willie Taggart as well, another new head coach. You can see how many times Florida plays a new head coach on their schedule this year. Willie Taggart coming in to take over a Seminoles team that had another very disappointing year last year. Jimbo Fisher leaving to take the Texas A&M job, but another solid quarterback in DeAndre Francois. Willie Taggart and Dan Mullen both are offensive minds. Willie Taggart returning 8 on offense, 4 on defense. So if you look at starters alone, which don't always mean guaranteed success, Florida owns the edge, but Florida State, I think, owns a better quarterback, and they have home field advantage. And depending on how Florida State's doing, they're going to really want to win this game going into a potential conference championship game or trying to solidify a solid bowl berth. I'm going to give the edge to Florida State in what is going to be a close game down at Doak Campbell Stadium. So a loss there for the Gators, which is going to give them a 9-3 record in Dan Mullen's first year as head coach at Florida, which after a 4-7 year last year is going to be huge for the Gators. Nothing to complain about. Very exciting. Things are going to be trending up for them. A lot of this Florida team is young. They returned 19 starters. I expect some to depart for the NFL draft, but they have enough people that could return next year for them to make a bigger run at Georgia for the SEC East crown. So a very solid year for Dan Mullen, and they're only going to continue to get better from here. We've seen what he did at Mississippi State, and I expect the same results, if not better, here at Florida. So a 9-3 record for the Florida Gators for the 2018 season. If you have not already, please go ahead and go follow us on Twitter for more news and updates at Gridiron Expert, just at Gridiron Expert. Also on Instagram at The Gridiron Expert. And as always, here on YouTube, please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.